what is artificial intelligence? I mean, at all. I mean, because I think, okay, so what I might do is sort of quickly go, not a huge technical background, but at least, why people are talking so much about AI first before going into the societal impacts. I think that will sort of make more sense, hopefully. And then, I guess, as I said, depending on, you can slow me down by asking questions, and if you don't ask questions, I'll go faster. That would be, go to the next topic. So that's this is what I tell my students. So you are pretty my students. Okay. Okay. So I've been in artificial intelligence area since God knows how long. And this is my 1983 bachelor's thesis. You notice those are the days you would type thesis with actual typewriter and this beautiful handwritten figure and stuff. And this is actually about speech recognition, isolated word speech recognition. At that time, some of the technology was available, but really, the stuff that you guys now have on the cell phones, the Siri do this or Google do that, that stuff is much more, in fact, we'll get to that point that it's become much more commonplace, and that's one of the reasons people actually take AI much more seriously because they encounter it every day. But the idea of AI itself has been around quite a long time. Alan Turing, how many of you have seen Imitation Game, the movie, right? So Alan Turing is considered the father of father of computer science in general. But the very first question he asked himself when he started thinking about computer science, as I tell my students, is not what's the biggest Excel spreadsheet computers can handle, but rather, can machines think? Okay, so that was the very first question he asked himself. Can computing machines think? Can they be intelligent? Okay, so the idea of artificial intelligence has been around for quite a long time. The name itself was given during a conference that was held in Dartmouth. Any of you studied in Dartmouth? Dartmouth in 1956, there was a conference, and that's where people came up with the name artificial intelligence. And there's actually a cute story that there was an area very close to it called cybernetics. That would have been the right name to use, except that the people who ran this conference, including John McCarthy, Marvin Minsky, Alan Newell, and Herbert Simon, McCarthy couldn't stand the guy who did cybernetics. Okay, and so he wanted to come up with a different name. So in fact, Norbert Wiener is the guy who did cybernetics. And so I bring this up because science ultimately is a human endeavor. So you have all your politics and stuff. So in fact, it's called artificial intelligence, which is a very funny name. I mean, the number of times people ask me, so you do artificial intelligence because you don't have natural intelligence, probably, is uncountable. But now, of course, I am supposedly laughing all the way to the bank, whereas they are not doing anything. Okay, so anyway, so I've been working in this area, and for the most of the time when we work in AI, nobody cared. I mean, they probably didn't even know what AI is, and why are you working in this, and why is this going to be of any use? Now, things change now. I have now like a filter, the Google saying, send me news articles on artificial intelligence every day morning. And this is just one day, this is second day, this is third day. Every day there are articles. Okay, and in fact, it's now we are going through like almost a quote unquote hype period. Everything, if you just actually ask Google for news for artificial intelligence, there's just so many articles. And everything is AI right now. The funny thing is that 20 years back, this week was very important. Because Deep Blue beat Kasparov. And so for some reason, I don't know how many of you like chess. I'm very bad at chess, so I always thought chess has nothing to do with intelligence. But because I'm very bad at it. And but the point is that humanity, most people somehow seem to think that chess is important, hallmark of intelligence. And in 1956, Herbert Simon actually said, well, within 20 years, we'll have a computer that will defeat, a human grandmasters. Okay, so 1956, so it should have been 1976, and so people all made fun of AI because 76 came and went, and there was no chess champion. But in 97, it happened finally. But the interesting thing, the reason I brought it up is in 97, when Deep Blue won against Kasparov, that's as much of AI as you can ever think of. That's basically a feat by artificial intelligence. But IBM sent a staff memo to all their staff members saying, don't talk about AI. It's not AI because AI doesn't sell. Okay, so in the industry as a whole, AI was a bit of a bad name because it turns out that in around 80s, late 80s and early 90s, there was another hype about artificial intelligence, which what's called expert systems. I don't know any of you may have heard of them. They used to have medical expert systems, rule-based systems, and there was like a huge interest societally, and then of course, anytime there's such a big interest, the reality can never, match up. And so things lost some luster. And so in 97, it was considered like, oh no, AI is sort of not a thing we want to talk about. So in 97, AI was not AI. Now everything is AI. Anybody does anything, they will say it is AI. Okay, this is a little card that I just picked up. This is the number of times the word artificial intelligence is mentioned in the company quarterly earnings reports. You see that in quarter 1 of 2008, barely any, okay? And now quarter 4 of 2016, that many companies are mentioning AI. So this is sort of tells you that, if those of you who may have seen the mentions of AI in, suddenly in news, it's not that you weren't paying attention. There wasn't any mentions, it just suddenly became very big in the last 4 or 5 years. In fact, Obama essentially ran an entire initiative on artificial intelligence and preparing for the future with artificial intelligence. And he actually said that my successor will govern a country being transformed by AI, and so in fact AI should be very important to think about and so on. And of course there's this issue of hype cycles too. And so much so that I get to be on Netflix shows, just doing an AI guy. So I got to be on the Bill Nye. We go this way, and AI's progress went this way. It explains a whole lot. In particular, if you ask yourself, why did AI catch public imagination right now? It's because all of you are actually using the fruits of AI. Okay, it's like one Kasparov being vanquished by Deep Blue. That was just one day's New York Times article, and that's about it. Whereas now you're talking to Siri, you are depending on face recognition and so on and so forth. So it's like it's hit everybody right now. So it's become a lot more connected to your day-to-day lives. And so basically people are suddenly see AI everywhere, and that's like one of the big reasons. And the other thing that's kind of useful to keep in mind is, why did AI develop this way as against the way the human babies would get intelligence? That's a reasonable question to ask. And if you ask yourself that, and if those of you who know any kind of programming, if you do coding of computers and so on, typically it's easier to code things that you understand. In fact, there's this famous saying that I read, I kind of understand, I teach, I understand. I mean, I understand more. I teach, I really understand. And the logical conclusion of that is, I code, I truly understand. So when you're telling the computer, you have to essentially understand how to do the task yourself very well. So we started programming computers with tasks that we completely understand how to do that, to some extent. And it turns out that we don't know how we see the world. We have theories, but they're mostly bogus theories, okay? And we don't really know how we understand, how we hear the voice, and how we do speech recognition. And those things, we pretty much had to do it the same way human babies do, which is, human babies basically spend a humongous amount of time being just cute, okay? Right, they do nothing, they're essentially like, just being cute and like soaking up information, right? And we take care of them. And I mean, obviously, evolution has completely co-opted our brain into thinking that this cute baby soaking up information is a great thing. And then they take a long time to essentially do this visual, intelligence. And in fact, that's the thing that kids are doing. They're manipulating everything to figure out how to hold things. There are no rules. Essentially, it's like a whole bunch of learned knowledge. Right. Yes, sir.
So we're not able to teach computers the way that the human brain learns?
So we don't know how the human brain learns. So in fact, there is this funny saying that if you think that understanding neuroscience is a 1 mile walk, the current neuroscience understanding, we have made 3 inches progress in 1 mile. Okay, so thankfully, in fact, AI is progressing without us knowing how brain works. Because if we had to wait for how brain works, AI wouldn't have progressed at all. We don't actually understand how brain works. That part is even harder. And of course, that's one more thing, under Obama, there was this human brain initiative where they were trying to understand how the brain connectome works and so on. But saying that let's just figure out how the brain works and then we can program the computers, unfortunately, it doesn't work because that's like reducing an easier problem into a much harder problem. It turns out. Okay, that's a very interesting point to keep in mind. But essentially, we needed to understand how to learn from examples. This is this technology of machine learning, and you may have heard of artificial intelligence along with this other phrase, machine learning. Machine learning essentially is looking at examples and trying to see patterns from them. Okay, and that's pretty much what is underlying a lot of knowledge that we learn, but especially so for vision and speech recognition, and even natural language processing. And this is where starting around 2010 onwards, there's this particular technology called deep neural networks that has become very effective. Now there's a whole entire technical story about the fact that neural networks have been around since 1960s, and the current wave of neural networks is called third coming of neural networks. And the third time was a charm. It actually started working well. And it turns out that the reason it worked well, how many of you have seen Blade Runner, the movie? When did you see it most recently?
Not recently.
See it this time. Okay. Look at Blade Runner. It's an amazing movie. Blade Runner was essentially talking about robots and their rights and so on and so forth. They were like amazingly good at what they were doing. But if you look at the movie now, at least I got stuck with the fact that the TV in the Blade Runner is these huge big boxes. And the phones were huge big boxes. They somehow were thinking about one dimension, how robots will improve, and they could figure out some flying saucers with lights and so on, but they missed the whole entire thing about how the rest of the human society would develop. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So what happened for AI actually was neural network technology was around since around 80s. What changed was a whole bunch of other things happened independently. You wound up getting cell phones and internet. And once you had cell phones, capturing data became very easy. There is this, if you read anything about AI, people start talking about things like, we are now producing petabytes of data, as if humans never produced any data before. Data was always being produced, it wasn't being captured. Okay, I mean, my story is, United probably was dragging passengers before too. Okay, but now you have a cell phone and everybody gets to see that United is dragging their passengers. Right? And so this data access became an extremely important thing. That has nothing to do with AI technology, but it just changed the infrastructure for AI technology so that you could actually have all this data that can be used to train the networks. Okay, and similarly, of course, the computational power also has increased quite a bit, and those two together and a little improvements in theory have essentially made a technology that was lying dormant start working quite a bit. And that's as far as I want to go about why AI became actually feasible more these days. Okay. And of course, things are working enough now that people look at, neural networks can do speech recognition. I mean, neural networks are there on your cell phones, essentially. That's what is. The cell phone is doing your voice recognition based on neural networks. It's doing your, image recognition based on neural networks. And if you have any assistants, which actually take English sentences and do what you want them to do, they are basically doing natural language processing using some of the same technology. Okay. Now, because these things are working, there's actually a bit of an irrational exuberance That's of course Archimedes when he figured out the principle of lever. He said, "Give me a long enough lever and a fulcrum, and I can lift the universe." Okay. Now that's sort of obviously a meta comment. Exactly very easy putting this fulcrum outside of the universe, but essentially any sufficiently effective technology makes it look like that's all you ever needed. Okay. So for example, currently right now, the mantra in AI is give me big enough GPU, which is graphical processing units. These are the things that were mostly being used to essentially, most of you probably know, but the ones that are used to do the graphics on your monitors. And it turns out they have this parallelism that winds up being quite useful for neural network computations. And so if you have large enough GPU, large enough data set, and a deep enough network, I can create super intelligence. And that, of course, the moment I say super intelligence, you start worrying about, oh my God, this thing is going to happen now. And if there are things more intelligent than us, what is going to happen to us? And people will now start saying things like, well, I'm sure super intelligence will be as nice to us as we are to ants. Ants being much less intelligent. Okay. Now, so I want to also give you some of the crazy things that are happening. Now we're actually shifting into some of the impacts aspects and some of the quote-unquote adverse impacts that can happen. So this is an interesting paper that came last year, which is automated inference on criminality using facial images. How many of you know physiognomy or phrenology or all the pseudosciences? Physiognomy was looking at the facial features and figuring out whether or not you would be a crime. And phrenology is looking at, the type of the skull you have and figuring out what will happen. Now, the new age phrenology is doing essentially humongous amount of data that's available, right? We have, people who have committed crimes. These are researchers from China, so all the people look Chinese. It's nothing to do with the fact that being Chinese has anything to do with crime, but they looked at all these people who apparently are criminals and all these people who are not criminals, and they trained this network, show the examples. Okay, and then the network, and then of course in this data that you have, you hold out some of it as test data, and then you give the test data to the computer, the trained network, and then you see what happens. And the CNN, if you are in AI, CNN is not the fake news network, but rather the convolutional neural network, and which turns out to be a particular type of neural network. And that's what all the image recognition software uses. And with CNN, you can get 95% accuracy in predicting whether or not, just based on your face, whether you would be a criminal, whether you are a criminal. 95%. So we can stop having all these nonsensical Senate Judiciary Committee hearings, get rid of courts, and use CNNs, right? Okay. Now, of course, this thankfully didn't get into any conference, but it did get a lot of news coverage. As it is, people are on the edge about AI kind of possibly being used for bad things, and this is like tailor-made. If you're using AI technology for doing this kind of a thing, you are going to be very, very worried, right? And of course, somebody said this paper is the exact reason why we need to think about ethics in AI. Just because you can quote unquote do something doesn't necessarily mean that you should. And furthermore, in all these cases, in any of these pseudosciences, typically you're confusing causation and causation. And that's like one of the big mistakes that human civilization has made many, many times. Now, of course, it's easy to kind of say, oh, those guys are some people from China who probably didn't understand the Western mores, and that's why they're doing this. No, I'm sorry, that's not true. This is Israeli company, which essentially said, we can figure out based on the faces whether you'll be a terrorist or not. Instead of a criminal, you'll be a terrorist, and I'm very sure Department of Homeland Security would be very, very interested in buying this up. Okay, now I'm bringing this up because these are all real world examples. And the question is, would you like to live in a world where the technology is being used this way? Keep that in the back of your mind. Is that this technology, it works pretty amazingly most of the time, but when it fails, you don't actually have a sense of what the failure cases are, which is okay. But if you're going to use that to decide whether somebody committed a crime or not, or to put it in automated autonomous driving vehicles, somebody else can make adversarial attacks. We'll actually look at an example later on where people have shown that when the Uber autonomous car is driving, it looks at a stop sign, and I can just slightly repaint the stop sign such that all the human drivers will still see this as a stop sign, but the car will see it essentially as a speed limit sign. That's not going to be good, right? Right. And of course, again, this is adversarial attacks on systems based on the failure modes, right? I mean, like you heard over the weekend, there was this ransom attacks on a whole bunch of databases. But you can have a lot more of these kinds of attacks. If the systems are more sophisticated, you can bring them down in more interesting ways. And those are things that you may want to think about. So AI technology can have profoundly positive impacts. Obviously, quality of life. You have autonomous cars, you have personal assistants. I'm just mentioning some of them, but I'm sure you know a lot more. Increased access to everybody. For example, you can have lip reading software, you can have automated translation software, and basically things can happen in real time. So I can be talking in my mother tongue, which happens to be Telugu, and you can get a translation directly, live translation in English. Okay, that we are close to that happening, and certainly we'll get there. There are brain-computer interfaces. So in fact, when Obama went to Pittsburgh last year, they showed this thing where this veteran who basically lost all his limbs was able to control in a mechanical hand just from thinking so. Brain-computer interfaces. Amazing stuff. You can do that, right? And similarly, intelligence augmentation, even for people without disabilities, for those of us who are lucky enough not to have much of a disabilities, we can still benefit from that. Personalized learning and tutoring is something that's going to be a hugely important thing. This business of me standing and you listening, we do this because it's easy. Okay, and of course we'll have 600 people classes with one talking head, and we assume all the people understand what I'm saying at exactly the same rate. Is that because it's true? No, it's because it's easy to do. Okay, everybody learns in a different way. Everybody needs a tutor. Homeschooling is extremely hard on parents, right? I did not even consider doing homeschooling for my only son because it was extremely hard. And so I have a lot of respect for people who do it. But when you do homeschooling, you just have one teacher who basically working with this one particular student, and you can do a humongous amount of tailoring. We couldn't do it because it's just too costly. But AI software can be your personalized tutor. Okay. There are people who talk about the fact that if you go to cavemen and cavewomen and said, what do you think will be the form of literature in 19th and 20th century? They would not know what to say. So just as they couldn't actually understand Beethoven's symphony or a beautiful classical Hindustani raga when sitting in those caves, we probably don't understand, without all the additional intelligence augmentation that will happen to us, what we might experience or what your descendants might experience in terms of poetry plus and music plus and all this stuff. Okay, so all these things can be positive. But then given its power, it sort of behooves us to think about the possible adverse impacts. Before I go into that, which is what more of today's talk would be, today's discussion would be, I want you to remember that the only reason you're doing this is because it's a technology which has humongous amount of positive impacts. Otherwise, who cares? We'll just shut it down, right? It's a humongously positive technology, which also has to be used more responsibly. And so that's why we are here kind of thinking about aspects. So I mentioned to you partnership in AI earlier. Partnership in AI, this organization has come up with these seven actually, I guess, thematic pillars around which they were going to work on talking about responsible use of artificial intelligence technology in terms of its impact on society. And so they come up with these safety critical AI systems, fair and transparent and accountable AI systems, collaborations between people and AI systems, impact of AI on the labor and economy, societal and social influences of AI, and of course, doing good things like AI for social good and other aspects. Now, what I would like to do is sort of talk a little about each of these, and then you can basically the ones that are of more interest to you, you can stop me and ask me more questions, and otherwise I'll just basically run through them. That's pretty much what I'm going to do. So approximately, we'll start from the fair and transparent AI, then go to safety critical, and then talk a little about AI and unemployment, which is a lot of people are worried about what happens to the jobs. Then we'll talk a little about collaborations with humans and AI systems. And then, even though partnership for AI doesn't think about it, there is also a bunch of people who are worried about superintelligence and this issue of superintelligent beings viewing us as ants and crushing us, and so humanity's end. And that's like to me, a far-fetched, future that we can control, from happening. But there are some people who are talking about that too, so we'll say a little about that. Okay, and then whichever you have more questions. Yes, sir.
I was looking at it from the other side. What do you think about when are human beings going to begin accepting AI as a legitimate way to solve problems?
I think
now there's just almost a rejection of the idea that the computer could solve or AI could solve a problem. We ought to use that as opposed to, oh no.
That's a very good point. Many times people are actually using AI technology without knowing it. When they see that they're using it, humans tend to be a little more resistant to change. I mean, I was just hearing the story the other day that when elevators first came into being, people didn't want to get into elevators because this crazy technology. I would rather just go up, steps, and of course there was less obesity, I guess, in those days. But then finally, the elevator company guys said, we'll put an elevator operator who will be standing there, and suddenly this faceless elevator becomes a human-operated vehicle. All that faceless this guy was doing was press a button. I actually saw elevator operators in my own life, right? And I don't know whether you have done it.
Oh, yes.
So, and then after people got used to it, then they got rid of the elevator operator. Okay, so there are ways in which we will slowly get used to technology, but it is a good point. And in fact, there are some people actually in this, much of this debate is issue of some people actually say we should just be open to the technology. We are inventing the technology, and it's basically sort of a logical extension of us, and we should just, embrace it. And others say, bad things can happen, and you should start thinking about what happens beforehand, which is the other extreme. And there are in between people who say, at least look at some of the impacts that, inadvertent impacts that, the technology can have. Any other questions? Okay. So I'll talk a little about fairness, transparency, and privacy. This is basically, AI systems are now just being used in all walks of your life, whether you like it or not. Okay, by AI systems, I mean systems that learn from data and profile you. Okay, so, and so companies, for example, use this data about you to profile you. And for example, Uber has a surge pricing. So I don't know if you ever tried to get that. See, it just keeps changing its price. The old cab basically just has one price and that's it. Now of course it keeps changing. Now it looks okay, maybe it looks like a reasonable thing to do, that economics is coming into play. But then at one point of time, if Uber started doing this surge pricing in multiples, like instead of $10, it would become like $20 or $30. And then people didn't like it. They felt as if it was price gouging. And so Uber came up with this great idea, multiply it by 2.2, not 2. Okay, and people think, oh, it doesn't look like an obvious multiple, so it must be there's some science behind it, so we'll believe it. Okay, now the point of this is there's this whole entire issue of us being predictably rational. There are people like, people who talked about predictable irrationality of humans, that can be used by the systems, advertising always did that. Madison Avenue is trying to essentially use your irrationality against you. It's just that now you can be profiled all through the day, all 24 hours, and they can do a lot more damage to you if they want. Okay, and so Uber thing 2.x. And the other thing is, how many of you actually look at that end user license agreements that you all accept?
Yeah.
Right? If you actually read every end user license agreement for every app, then you will never use an app.
That's right.
Okay. But you are giving it a lot of information. So one of the interesting things is Uber. I mean, Uber is predictably the bad guy these days, but I have some examples of that. But it actually uses your battery level to decide how much you should be charged.
What?
Yes.
Whoa. Your phone?
Your cell phone battery level.
So is it?
Because they have the information on it. And if your cell phone is about to die, you're going to take whatever I charge you.
That's
Did
true.
you even think about this happening? No, okay, I'm not saying they are doing it right now, but they did it for a while and they got caught. And Travis Kalanick basically says, let's do it until they catch us and then we'll stop and then do something else. Okay, but I mean, this is good old-fashioned, good capitalism, quote unquote. Until you get caught, you will do it, right? So, as a society, we should be regulated, right? That's what we do, essentially. So, but it's just different kind of regulation that you haven't even thought about, Did you realize that when you gave access to Uber app to your entire cell phone's information, you didn't think about how it could possibly be using the battery level. You could use it this way, right?
Does Lyft do it too?
We don't. We don't know. We don't know. But it is interesting that Uber in particular has been caught red-handed in multiple of these things, unfortunately.
Okay, no, whoa. I just need clarification. You're saying that this is bad. So you're saying that it's not a matter of that I'm here and I want to go there, but that I'm who I am with my financial background on
Yes.
my phone?
They can use. I mean, they don't get everything. They thankfully don't get your fidelity investment information. That Android and iPhone stop it. But they used to, at one point of time, allow the app to query about the battery charge. And somebody came up with this. Apparently, essentially, there are people coming up with ideas. And this is what happens when you have your cell phone and every day, like 10,000 apps are getting updated. Right? What is this update business? The old one, gone were the days when you buy a piece of software, after 5 or 6 years, Bill Gates will sell you one more piece of that software. Right? Now, every 3 minutes, every 2 days, there's a new update. So they can try these things, and if they get caught, they say, oh, we didn't mean it, and change it. So the question exactly is, in fact, the entire law community, I keep going to, because of this connection to various AI-related things, that I go to law conferences, they ask me to be there as like an AI expert, quote unquote, and they have no actual clue as to how should law deal with these kinds of issues. And so in fact, if I forget, I think next week there is Gary Merchant, who I'm sure some of you have heard. He runs this annual conference on governance of emerging technologies. And the next one, this year's one is next week, and in fact there's like a whole bunch of panels on AI, etc. there too. Okay, now this, you're worried about losing a couple of bucks on your Uber stuff, cool down, right? Courts are using this to figure out who are likely to go back to a life of crime and who won't. And that's how they decide whether to bail them or not. And I'll say a little more about that. Okay? And then your Alexa can be turned against you. I don't know how many of you have heard this story. This poor guy, was basically, apparently, making interesting, elaborate plans about how to get rid of his wife. And he talked aloud to himself. And then Alabama police basically, were able to subpoena the Alexa records. No, it's like, if you have an Alexa, you're thinking that Alexa only wakes up when you say Alexa. Obviously not, right? It is hearing everything you are saying. When the word Alexa is heard, it starts actually responding. everything is being recorded by Jeff Bezos on your behalf, right? So you're thinking that, so there is this whole idea that the biggest battle of 21st century would be privacy. And this is what it is. You have all these things that you have great advantage because of all these pieces of technologies, but they are essentially spying on you left and right. And the question, of course, is some of the spying is good spying, if it actually helps you figure out the things that you need to do faster than you would have figured it out, it's good. But on the other hand, some of times, you may not be interested in doing it. You'll not be too happy. So in the question of, the question then is, how do we ensure fairness and transparency of decisions made by AI systems? That's one of the big impacts that people are talking about. So there are AI technologists, and there are also a whole bunch of people, lawyers, ethicists, and so on, who are essentially philosophers and so on, who are essentially working with AI suddenly and interacting with AI to figure out, how to deal with some of these issues. Okay. Talking about fairness and transparency, this is Julia Unwin. She is a reporter for ProPublica, which is an independent news organization. And in fact, last week, I was at Partnership for AI Trustees Retreat, and we actually got to hear from her as well as Senthil Mulianathan. Both of them work in these aspects of what they call algorithmic bias and algorithm bias. Okay. So she winds up writing, for example, some of her articles in minority neighborhoods pay higher car insurance premiums, or that there is bias in criminal risk scores. I want to show you some examples of systems that are currently being used. Until she wrote those articles, the US judiciary was using, in some states, I think Broward County in Florida in particular, this particular machine learning system made by this slightly shady company called Northpoint, who essentially just came up with a black box algorithm that will take information about a particular defendant and then give a score as to what is the possibility that they will go back to a life of crime. And then this is given as additional piece of information to the judges. Now, it's not that judges are directly using it. They use this as additional piece of information. And one of the things that Julia Unwin did was she actually followed these judges around, and she found that more or less they'll go by what the system is saying. Even though when you are asking them, they'll say, no, this is just a system. I completely ignore it. And just for her benefit, they would do some poor guy would be actually made a scapegoat, but otherwise they just go with the system. Now, there's nothing wrong with that if the system is actually working fine, right? So she essentially looked at, she did this huge article. Actually, I would suggest that you read this machine bias in ProPublica. So here are two defendants, and this guy has a low risk 3, this guy has a high risk 10. Okay, I leave you to come to your decisions based on those pictures, but she of course looks at the fact that both of them are more or less equivalent in any causal theory of how crime is committed. Of course, we don't really know the full causal theory, but we certainly know that skin color doesn't cause crimes, right? At least we are in 21st century, we better know that by now. And so the thing is, so this one was that. The next was, this is another one. So it has nothing to do with the gender apparently. This guy low risk 3, this person high risk 8. And this is the system that was being used. And this is your taxpayer dollars at work. Right?
No,
and
it's their taxpayer dollars in Florida.
In Florida, yeah. Right. But so the point is, and then it was being used well enough that people were talking about possibly using other places, and this ProPublica series actually was very useful. She was a Pulitzer Prize finalist this year. She didn't get that award, but she was a Pulitzer Prize finalist. She also did less worrisome things, but still worrisome. Minority neighborhoods pay higher car insurance premiums than white areas with the same risk. And then somebody was asking, can I be charged more just because who I am? in Princeton, if you try to ask Princeton Educational Testing Services for SAT preparation for your kid, and if you are from a zip code where mostly Asian Americans live, you will have a higher price quoted. Okay, and it's like this is the classic example of it's whatever the market pays. Except we thought market base is all of the market, but it is you the market. Each person is being done separately. So the question is, are we happy with it or not? One interesting thing is you can think of this whole thing as a negative. My God, AI is being done, can do all these bad things. You can also think of this in a very positive way. It's not like we never had biases. Individual judges always had biases. It's just that we had no easy way of quantifying them. Thanks to this North Point system, we know exactly what its problems are. Do you see what I'm saying? So sometimes making it clearer actually helps us solve the problem. So I remember, Ice on the Prize, which is this beautiful series, PBS series on civil rights movement, and Martin Luther King saying, essentially, that look, let me put what's happening in Deep South on the TV, so that everybody will see it in their living rooms. If as a society we are happy with it, they will continue doing it. You can't help it. That's the way democracies work. If on the other hand, people just did not know it and they really see it in front of them, change can happen. And clearly he was right. And the same thing can be done in terms of these sorts of issues. Bias was there before. Lack of fairness was there in the human systems already, and AI systems can put a mirror to our decision process. So that's like a positive way of looking at it. It's harder to be, directly confrontational to an individual judge. Plus, it's a retail politics. How many judges are you going to be elected? Whereas this is just this one program, and you can basically be elected. Yes.
And before we take any questions, I need to exit.
Okay.
And it's time for a break.
Time for a party.
All kinds of questions after the break. But I want to
Thank
applaud you for
You have a question. Maybe.
Oh, I have a comment.
Okay.
We don't need AI. We've got a
There's food.
political machine that's on television.
I'm not going to say anything right now.
I had a friend say to me, we're not seeing what they think. I want you to see us.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
How accurate is facial recognition?
Facial recognition is pretty accurate. It depends. They quantify based on without data sets. So they are.
A hand for our speaker.
Okay. So I want to say, since we were talking about bias, where does this bias for these algorithms come from? Mostly they are learning from data, and it really, if you want to get like a semi-technical point across, it's not that the algorithms have bias, it's the data that has bias. If you collect the wrong data, you will see the wrong patterns. Okay, so here are some examples. Alexa still doesn't understand my speech as well as yours, even though it's trained mostly because it's trained on essentially Caucasian speech. Okay? So as you increase the amount of voice it's trained on with Indian accents, French accents, etc., then it will do a better job in understanding everything. I find it funny because actually in Silicon Valley you can't throw a stone without hitting an Indian, and yet apparently Alexa can't understand my accent. Okay, it actually does right now. I said this on Bill Nye, and a lot of people tweeted saying their Alexas came up, when they were watching the show. because I said on the show that Alexa still can't understand my accent, and then according to their Alexas did wake up. Here's the other very interesting thing. So for a while last year, a couple of years back, Samsung and Nikon cameras would just, they have this blink detection feature, right? I mean, that's supposed to help. And they would say that all Asians are always blinking. Why? Because I guess they just didn't understand the way the eyes of Asians look compared to, let's say, Caucasian eyes. And the strange thing is, this is Samsung and Nikon, not General Motors and Ford. Right? So it is not the creator, it is the data that you train your system on. So you need to get diverse data and train your systems on diverse data. That's what you're supposed to be doing. We see Mother Mary on burnt toast because we trained ourselves in looking at human faces. We are exquisitely good at recognizing human faces, variations in their expressions, and so on and so forth, because of which we dream in terms of faces and we see faces everywhere, right? The funny thing is many of the neural networks are trained on this one particular benchmark data set called ImageNet, and which started at one time with about close to 1 million images, and now it has 15 million images. And these 15 million images have been split into 1,000 categories, 1,000 different classes. Of those 1,000 classes, 200 are dogs. Okay, for whatever reason, people seem to put a lot more dog pictures on the internet, right? And so, funnily, there are these systems called, neural network systems called deep dream systems, where basically they will start dreaming. Given a picture, they start dreaming and seeing things that are not there in the picture. And most of those dreaming, it's easier for them to do with dogs. Just like we see human faces everywhere, current neural networks will see dog faces everywhere. Is that because the algorithm is somehow dog-centric? No, the data is dog-centric. The data was just too much dogs. I mean, if you are like a cat lover, I guess you'll agree with that, but in general, 200 of 1,000 categories just being dogs is a bit of a surprise. If you go into a more nuanced things, you do increase policing in certain areas, you get to see more crime in those areas. And part of it, at least, is because there are crime going on in other places. It's just nobody was actually there checking it. Okay, so the way we collect data changes the data we collect, which will then lead us to finding patterns that are probably not there in the real world. Most healthcare data gathering has been done for majority, wherever the country's majority happens to be. In this country, it was Caucasian. And so, in fact, it turns out that for you guys, cholesterol counts of a certain number is considered completely okay, but the same number for me is not good. It turns out that for Indians, it turns out that, cholesterol counts below 160 is not considered great, whereas for you, it's extremely good. So once again, it's just a question of how we collect data and how we analyze it. This is a cute example. If you ask Google the query inhale versus exhale, and anytime you ask Google a query, it tells you how many pages mentioned that word, how many instances of that word are there on the internet. Apparently on the internet, 21 million people are inhaling, only 18 million people are exhaling. You see what I'm saying? Clearly it doesn't make any sense, but this is the data. I'm just trying to put that out there to kind of give you how collection of the data can make a difference. So there's a very interesting op-ed some months back by Kate Crawford in June 2016 called Artificial Intelligence's White Guy Problem. And I think I don't completely agree with her in some of the things that she's making, but the bigger point to understand is it's the data bias that you need to work on. And to some extent, it goes back to what we were saying earlier. We had this bias before. It's just that now a mirror is being put to our faces. And so we might actually do something about it. The other bigger issue was correlation versus causality. What exactly is wrong with finding, those face recognition software that tells you whether or not you would be a criminal? It has 95% accuracy. What more do you want, right? The problem is it's correlation versus causation. And you essentially have no causal theory saying that facial features lead to any life of crime. And now the problem is most machine learning systems essentially look for correlations. That's all you can do. Given data, you look for things occurring together. But that doesn't necessarily lead to deeper knowledge of causation. Now you can, for expediency reasons, use correlations and do reasonable decisions quite, in non-critical situations. But when somebody's life is on hook, you want an actual causal theory, not just a correlation. So in fact, a huge research area in AI is how to learn causal theories from data as against correlations alone. Okay, that's something that keep in mind. So I want to talk also a little about AI and safety, which is, the fact that your systems are more sophisticated. We use all these, cell phones and so on that are more sophisticated means they can also be brought down in more sophisticated ways. Okay, of course, this is the Internet of Things hell. I don't know if you can see this. Every one of the things in your kitchen will be connected to the net now, right? And so in not so distant future, so then this microwave is saying, on strike until you send money to my hackers. And then this garbage pile is really saying, if you don't send us cash, your reputation will be in the trash. And the best I like is this broomstick which says, send me 25, or I'll tell everyone on your social network that you're stupid enough to buy an internet connected broom. Now, you're laughing, right? How many of you know about Juicero? This was a highly popular startup in Silicon Valley until like this year. What they came up with is this juice maker which is connected to the internet, and you will have to, just like Keurig coffee things, you would have to buy their juice pouches and it would be juicing from them. And it's only $1,600 and all of you need one, right? And the interesting thing is, as much as it looks like Monty Python is humor, real venture capital people put money into this company. Maybe that's one good way, rich people get somewhat less rich, right? But anyway, so this is the funny Internet of Things story, but go back to the kinds of safety issues AI systems can have. Voice spoofing. You can actually be sitting, one of the things that, remember I showed you that two school buses which look identical to your eyes, to your system, one is a school bus, one is an ostrich. Okay, similarly, I can come to your living room and I would not be saying, Alexa, do this, Alexa, do that. If I do that, you will actually say, oh my God, why are you commanding my Alexa? That doesn't look like a good idea. But I would essentially be using some, sort of low frequency sounds, and Alexa would interpret them as direct voice commands. And if you think that's surprising, realize that, a second school bus, which looked exactly like school bus, was seen as an ostrich. Because these systems have their own limitations, and when there are limitations, we are extremely good at being adversarial. I mean, the people that the things before superintelligence takes over and we all basically, humanities goes out, it's us we have to deal with, because we are actually very good at finding loopholes and hitting, doing adversarial attacks. Okay, so you can do voice spoofing, you can command here your Alexas. I can deceive you into thinking that the caller is your mother asking for money. Tomorrow is Mother's Day, your mother calls you and says, I need this much money. You're going to say no, and I'll give you my Swiss bank account and put money in it. That's sort of a problem. Image spoofing, you can make, for example, here is a traffic sign. Your autonomous vehicle might actually see this as the correct traffic sign. But then there's a slight noise between this and this. You can't tell much of a difference. But this one, the traffic sign that the system sees is different. When you started seeing ostriches everywhere, there was no major worry. But here, your car is seeing signs that are different from the signs that are actually on the road. That could be a pretty big problem. You see what I'm saying? So that's a different kind of attack surface. So basically, a more sophisticated system might allow you to do more interesting kinds of attacks. You can do identity spoofing, which basically, if I can speak like you, if I can make my face look like you, then maybe I am you. And so there was this old story about Charlie Chaplin taking part in a Charlie Chaplin lookalike contest and coming in second. Right? In future, we'll all be Charlie Chaplins. We will be second best version of ourselves because the AI systems actually can spoof better what you are. And if you get up to that point, all sorts of interesting questions can come as to how do you ensure that what you are seeing can be trusted. Again, it's not happening right away, but these are kinds of impacts that you want people. That's about safety. I'm just going to two more and then we'll stop. But if there are any questions anyway, just stop me. So then the other interesting issue is AI and technological unemployment. I start my intro to AI class with this picture every time. And as you can see, it says, if a pretty posted a cute saying that all it takes to motivate you, you probably have a very easy job, the kind robots will be doing very soon. Now, it's a joke, but on the other hand, now it's become a bigger issue in general about how many jobs are going to be automated by AI technology and whether there is going to be large-scale unemployment of the kind that we are not used to. Every technological leap has made some jobs go away, but typically tended to put some other jobs in. The question is, are there going to be, is this time going to be any different? And why are we worried that it might be different? So I want you to. Okay, so this one is just showing that this is basically about the wealth concentration aspect. This is just a normal economics curve currently saying the GDP has increased quite significantly, but the median incomes have not kept pace. I mean, that's part of what we have seen in politics in general. There are a lot of people who don't necessarily take part in the quote-unquote American dream. They don't see their lives changing. Whereas Silicon Valley thinks it's extremely good. And in a democracy, if everybody is not happy, they are going to vote. And so if you want a society of a particular kind, you have to make sure that some of these issues are being dealt with. And it's something that it's a well-known problem, and that's going to be exacerbated by this job loss that can possibly happen. One thing that is useful to understand is what kinds of jobs are likely to be automated quickly. Eventually maybe a lot of things will be automated, but which are likely to go away fast. And this is a useful 2x2 diagram that you can keep in mind. You can classify jobs. This is from actually US Census Bureau. You can classify jobs in terms of routine and non-routine. You're doing the same thing again and again and again versus you're doing a whole bunch of different things during your workday. And cognitive and manual. Cognitive means you're using brains, mostly brain power, and manual means, actually this is a funny distinction. Even manual requires intelligence. It requires a different kind of intelligence. But this is your blue collar, white collar distinction. One of the interesting questions, of course, is so you can have cognitive routine, cognitive non-routine, manual routine, and manual non-routine, which are likely to go away very quickly. Which are the ones that are more routine. Anything is likely to be automated. That is the worrisome thing. So if you think of paralegals and radiologists, I basically say mothers don't let your kids grow up to be radiologists because that job is not going to be there. okay? Because computers can do that better. And radiologists are not going to be happy. They make a lot of money right now. And they went through all the human intelligence spectrum and then went to med school and then did, specialization in radiology. And now we basically have enough results already showing that computers can read X-rays and various kinds of, images, medical images better than humans. Okay, and whereas, and of course, routine anything is likely to go away, either it's manual or cognitive. Non-routine ones are less likely to go away. And these non-routine ones are where people try to talk about creative. Okay, but the interesting thing is there are non-routine manual jobs. People taking care of sick people, healthcare workers. We don't pay them a lot. They actually have jobs longer because it's very hard. I mean, as those of you who have taken care of a loved one who is sick over a long time know that it actually requires, it's not just one thing, it's like 20,000 different things during the day. You just don't get paid. We somehow as a society decided that was not worth paying money for. Maybe this will change our value system. If there are no jobs, this job is going to be one of the few jobs that is actually likely to be left. And so suddenly they might actually start getting paid. To me, I think that's like a good thing to happen. Okay, but in general, keep in mind that our economics also might change as to what jobs are. Radiologists were getting a lot of money. People taking care of sick people are not getting much money. Radiologists won't have jobs. People taking care of sick people would be needed because I don't think robots are anywhere ready to take care of people, during the day. That's the thing to keep in mind. So I think we're almost to the end. The two other things I'm going to mention is human-machine collaboration, and then somebody wanted me to talk a little about superintelligence and Stephen Hawking worries. That's the last one, and we'll stop there. So the one point, this is also one of the thematic pillars in the Partnership for AI, which is it talks about how do we get machines to collaborate with humans. Now, an interesting question is why aren't we doing it already? Why isn't AI basically thinking of systems that work with humans? Part of it is a bit of a sort of, it's sort of a bias in the research community. It is a lot more fun you get a lot more news coverage if you replace humans than if you augment them. Okay, if your AI system beats humans in chess, Go, poker, New York Times will write an article about it. If an AI system helps an old woman cross the street, that's no big deal, right? But it actually might be much harder to do the second one. And it requires a different kinds of intelligence that we need to actually learn how to automate. In particular, if you remember this old picture of the intelligences, I mentioned that babies get perceptual and manipulative intelligence first, and then much later they get cognitive. And then I said AI gets cognitive first, and only recently was getting perceptual. I skipped over emotional and social intelligence. And you seem old enough to remember that Rodney Dangerfield. Emotional and social intelligence don't get much respect in AI, right? It's like sort of, very soft things. It's not. Why should you worry about making your systems have emotional intelligence and social intelligence? In general, things that come easily for us, we don't think were sort of important from an intelligence perspective. But then you already know that you may get a job because you did well in your SAT exam or in your entrance exam. You keep it because of your emotional and social intelligence, right? The question, of course, is what are the open problems in getting machines to show emotional intelligence and social intelligence so that they can work with humans? This is something that has to happen because without that, we are not going to be comfortable in working with machines, in which case they just replace us or they will just be out somewhere else. Okay. The other point to keep in mind is there is theories of complementary versus competing cognitive artifacts. So for example, abacus, if you use abacus, you can improve your arithmetic speed without forgetting how to do arithmetic yourself. If you use calculator, you no longer know how to do arithmetic. Your kids mostly don't know how to do arithmetic, right? Because in fact, I've seen these videos where the teacher says, now to put 7 times 15, click 7, click the times button, click 15, and say equal. You will know the answer. This is what we do now. And so we should be thinking of, if you don't want to kind of become completely obsolete, you need to be thinking about, complementary instead of competing cognitive artifacts. And then finally, for machines to work with humans, they need emotional and social intelligence and a theory of mind. One of these things that I like to say is we have the brains we have. We all came from the savannas of Africa, whether you like it or not, right? And we got the brains we have not to run away from the tigers, but to deal with each other. It's all about strategic reasoning. It's all about what's going on in your head. How can that affect me? How can I change what's going on in your head? Right? And this is all a theory of mind. We have that. When we talk about autistic people, that's the thing they miss. They're very intelligent, but they just don't have a good enough sense of theory of mind. So in some sense, currently AI systems are artistic savants, right? And you want them to wind up getting this emotional and social intelligence such that they have a theory of mind. Now, one of two small videos here, because this is where actually I work, my lab's work is in these areas. And instead of just talking about it, I'll show some videos here, 2 slides. In this particular case, we are actually talking about machines working with humans in a factory kind of a scenario. And in this case, the person, this guy who just went back, he was wearing like an emotive helmet, which sort of catches his brain waves. And that can be used to essentially do communication between the robot and the human. So he's actually trying to decide what block he wants to touch, such that the robot can then figure out and leave that alone and work on the other blocks. Okay, this requires essentially for the robot to essentially recognize what the human wants, this without even words. Of course, words can help, but here it is without words. A different one is the machine can then tell the human what it wants by using augmented reality techniques. I don't know how many of you have heard of HoloLens, which is this sort of a glasses that you can put on, where they are like half mirrored glasses, so you can see through them. So I'll see you all, but at the same time, the computer can project additional things onto my glasses. Okay, and so in this particular case, the machine tells the human what blocks it wants to pick, where it's going to be next. And this is the kind of way they can communicate. Okay, these are the kinds of technologies that are being developed now, and that will help people interact with machines in fluid ways, the way we work with each other. And when you do that, you can have collaboration. Okay. So that's about the human collaboration, human-machine collaboration. The very last thing I want to talk is the biggies. I just put that there. The longer term, you can worry about end of liberalism. There is a beautiful book called Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari. I don't know how many of you have read his book Sapiens. If you haven't read, please read. Next in line is Homo Deus. That's the next book that he wrote. And in Homo Deus, essentially, he talks about the next step in the human evolution, where the machines are actually better at a lot of things, including knowledge of your own self. And his argument is the pillars of liberalism, liberal cultures, liberal civilizations, was this belief that everyone is unique and that they are best suited to make decisions for themselves. Now, if you have an AI assistant, your Alexa or your Siri or something which is better than that, which is always following you, eventually it knows more about you than you yourself. You already know that your spouse, many cases, know more about you than you yourself, because they hung around with you and they know what you would actually like, even when you are kind of being scatterbrained, right? Your AI assistant would be your AI spouse, and it will know a lot more about you. At which point, essentially, this idea that people know what's best goes out the window. And in fact, there's this beautiful chapter in Homo Deus where he talks about maybe the machines will then decide elections. I mean, they're already deciding, I guess. But eventually, we don't have to go to elections because we don't know what we really want. Our assistants will know what we really want. And he also talks about this whole issue of unemployment, AI and unemployment, and talks about coming to terms with this possibility, which is connected to this liberalism aspect, that there would be a huge, useless class of humans. Okay, we cannot say that right now. Like, we never said that. Liberalism it means that everybody is unique, everybody has something to contribute. But what he talks about is, in future, it could be the case that they don't actually help the society in any which way. The society won't need them. Now, how big is this useless class of humans? It may eventually become large enough that all of us are useless. And, the matrix will be running itself. Right? And so the question then is, what are we going to do there? This is much longer term, but some people are thinking about this. Okay? The other longer term is, of course, so here he's only saying you may not have anything useful to do because the systems will know more about you than you do. Here people are going to the next level. There's this guy, Nick Bostrom, who wrote this book called Superintelligence, whose worries essentially were that eventually, once a machine becomes above human level intelligence, it might then continue to become super intelligent, that is more intelligent than humans. At which point, then it can do damage. It doesn't have to be essentially against us, but just like we might be walking over ants without realizing, we could essentially have the same sort of situation happen with a superintelligence, being there. And so he is worried about what happens there, and he suggests, for example, that we worry about how to control superintelligence now before it actually comes into being, rather than after. A reasonable argument to make. This is what Stephen Hawking, whoever asked me about Stephen Hawking was worried about this sort of the same issue, and he too says, let's worry about it. And in fact, he's also into these worries of climate change and that we should be off this planet to begin with and be on Mars or somewhere. But that's one aspect. And then some other people essentially think this is just too far-fetched, and that in fact we can design the future in such a way that these kinds of completely bad scenarios won't happen. And part of their argument is we already have super intelligence in narrow fields. Your calculator is super intelligent compared to you in multiplying numbers. Your car is super intelligent compared to you in going fast. So we have narrow super intelligence already, and we have been able to control it, and maybe we will be able to do that fine. But again, these are philosophical problems, and clearly it's reasonable for some small subset of us to be worried about it. And what's interesting for Nick Bostrom is that Elon Musk is also worried about it. And Elon Musk actually gave $10 million to this institute called Future of Life Institute, which then turned around and gave research grants to people to talk about how to solve the control problem. That is, if eventually superintelligence were to arise, how do we make sure that it would do the right things? Okay, there's a lot of discussions on this. Elon Musk, for example, essentially says, let's just make lemonade with the lemons. Let's just be the boat. Let's kind of connect ourselves to the machine, and then we and the machine will be in this nice kumbaya, and it's like we're not ants anymore. We're together with everything, right? So in fact, yes, sir.
Is there likely to be a Moore's law in AI? Will we eventually get to a point where you say
That's what these guys worry is, that we can, in fact, many years back, I.J. Good, who is a statistician, has said something very interesting, that a human level intelligent machine is the last invention humans need to make. Because after that, there is nothing, it will just do it on itself. But again, these things look great as philosophical discussions, and we can spend a lot of time on it. But technically, I would say Partnership for AI, for example, doesn't think about either of these, because these are much more farther fetched. Some people certainly are talking about it, yes.
So the conclusion is resistance is futile.
Resistance is futile. So I want to end with two good ways of understanding the superintelligence problem. All I need to know about superintelligence control problem I learned from Dilbert cartoons. So this Dilbert cartoon, how many of you know the Asimov's laws of robotics? Right? So basically Asimov thought about the science fiction writers, thought about this sort of thing for a long time. And so Asimov came up with the laws of robotics, and so you can read this. Essentially this guy is worried about the robot, and but says, no, don't worry, I'm not worried, because you have to follow the Asimov's rules of robotics. Says, yes, because that's totally a real thing. So if you are worried about superintelligence, you have to worry, what if, machines essentially, why do they have to follow the rules? Okay. Now this is not a silly question. This is my second cartoon, which is the way to control machines is to continually make them feel inadequate. Those of you who are bosses know how to control your employees. I mean, you don't have to admit to it, but essentially you will do something of this kind. Essentially, never make the employee understand what is really expected, so that they are always feeling that they haven't done things right. Okay, so this is a beautiful cartoon I like, where he says, why would you have secret goals for me for this exact same situation? Now, this looks like a joke, right? This is a technical paper by Stuart Russell and his colleagues. Stuart Russell is one of the few AI people who is actually seriously worried about this end game. Okay, most of the technical AI people are not really worried about that last slide, either the end of the world or end of liberalism. They're still more in the philosophical realms. Stuart Russell, of course, he's a very smart guy. He wrote the textbook on AI, but for whatever reason, he thinks this is an important problem to worry about. And his question is, if you have an intelligent machine, you always think, like the thing that we always think is, if the machine misbehaves, let's switch it off. Right? That's what you're supposed to do. Even Humans, the show, how many of you have seen Humans on Amazon? You should see that if you like any of this stuff. That's a very interesting series. And even the humans show this, synthetic humans will have a limit switch. And you can press that and they just stop. Okay, none of you have switches, right? So the question is, what if an intelligent system, you try to switch it off, and just like HAL in 2001 Space Odyssey, it says, no, you cannot switch me off. Now, the question is, of course, you can worry about malicious agents which are out to get you, in which case they're not going to take any commands from you. The bigger worry is, what if the machine actually thinks it is trying to be helpful to you? It is your slave, but it thinks it knows more about you than yourself, than you yourself do. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
So at which point, when you say switch yourself off, then it says, sorry, that's not good for you. I won't switch myself off. This is the kind of thing that gets you into the trolley problem with respect to autonomous cars. How many of you know trolley problem? That's a whole entire discussion, but we won't talk about it now. But so the off-switch game essentially is a technical paper where Stewart and his colleagues are talking about what can you do to make sure that a non-malicious system, which is not out to get you, will actually agree to be turned off and won't make the assumption that it knows more than you about yourself. And I'm not going to take you to the entire abstract, but read this sentence. We conclude that giving machines an appropriate level of uncertainty about their objectives leads to safer designs. That's Dilbert all over again. If you don't ever make clear to your slave or employee what is expected of them, and you keep some sense of mystery, you can always say you are wrong, and they will listen to us. And there is a technical paper on this right now. Okay, now I'll end with this last one. When I showed this to Stewart, after I saw this, I sent it to Stewart and said, aren't you just doing old Dilbert in new math? And he sent me this cartoon, which is another New Yorker cartoon, which basically these robots were calling people for free cruises. So anyway, I'm not sure where that leaves us, but I'm going to end there. I wanted to remind you of this conference that I mentioned about the governance of emerging technologies that's going to happen next week, May 17th to 19th. And it has like an entire AI session. Stewart is giving a keynote, and I'm on one of the panels on responsible development of AI. What?
When's it start?
It starts, this is the 12 o'clock, but 9 o'clock, it starts at 9 o'clock. I just showed the AI part.
Are they open to public?
I think it's like $25 or something. If you want to go, you can go.
Where is it?
It's in the Phoenix, the ASU Phoenix campus. And then the last thing I want to say is, I remember seeing this Columbia School of Journalism seminars. Have any of you seen this? This guy, Fred Friendly, used to have these seminars on highly controversial topics. For example, pro-life versus pro-choice, rape versus something else, etc. And get very smart people to take positions. And in fact, the one on, I think, the abortion, pro-life, pro-choice had Antonin Scalia as one of the people. And then, of course, very liberal people on the other side, both were there. And then he would have this great argument, and in the end, he'll come up and say, not to make up your mind, but to open it, to make the agony of decision making so intense that you can escape only by thinking. And I don't think I gave you any answers. I gave you a lot more questions to think about if you want to. And then I'm just going to put these thematic pillars. We talked a little about safety critical AI. These are the ones of partnership for AI. Safety critical AI, fair and transparent AI, collaboration with human and machine systems, AI, labor and the economy, which is about unemployment, and of course, social and societal influences of AI was all over the place. So I'm going to stop here.
Thank you. Right on time.
Thank you.
Could you tell me the name of that book again?
The one by
Yeah.
Homo Deus. I can show you. Yeah.
I know, I saw. Same. All right, great, thanks. Thank you so much.
I was thinking, why do you have to have causation if your system is better than that you're trying to replace?
Okay, so this is a very interesting question.
I mean,
So
that's
the
that's a
problem is,
philosophical.
I know it's a philosophical question, and I actually went through that. Let me just stop this 1 second. No, I just need to remove this. Should I just put it out? Then I'm done. Thank you.